Also, welcome to all of the participants in today's activity. Thank you so much for participating in our event today. So for today's activity, we will have two sessions. Per session, we will have learned about the topic, which is from Mr. Christovik Simatupang and Mr. Prabowo for 90 minutes. And the second session, we will have a Q&A session about the topic for 25 minutes. And for now, I will read the rules during the geothermal class today. So to all participants, please listen carefully to keep the event going. First, speaker will explain the material in Indonesia, and for the Q&A session, the participant can use Indonesian or English to ask the speakers. Second, participants are prohibited to spam chat during the activity. Third, participants must speak and chat politely when the event takes place. Fourth, participants are required to use Zoom username with their real name, not a nickname, during the activity. So for the participants who have not used their real name, you can change it now. Fifth, participants are required to turn off the video and make sure you are muted during the presentation from the speaker. Sixth, for participants who wants to ask questions, you can only ask in the Q&A sessions. You can raise your hand first and ask your question, but you must ask the MC's permission before you speak. Seventh, during the Q&A session, participants who wants to ask questions are encouraged to turn on the camera. Eighth, for participants who wants to ask questions via chat, you should use this format, name_question. Ninth, participants are encouraged to use a background Zoom during the meeting, but if the participant cannot use the background Zoom during the meeting, our committees are not burdensome. 10, participants must obey all the rules that the committees has arranged. Okay, first of all, before we start our activity, it's better for us to pray first. Pray begin. Pray finish. So now we will hear an opening speech from the President of AAPG Unpad Chapter 2023 to Mr. Albertus Bayu Aditya. The time and place is yours.
Okay, thank you, Nunik, as the Master of Ceremony today, for allowing me to deliver my speech in front of you all. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening and greetings to everyone. Welcome to the series of AAPG competition by the CE Division of AAPG Unpad SE 2023. Introduce myself. My name is Albertus Bayu Aditya. You can call me Adit. I speak here as the President of AAPG Unpad SE 2023. First of all, let us praise to the Almighty. Because of His grace, we can attend this first APG competition in this Zoom meeting together in a good condition. The Honorable Mr. Christovik Simatupang and Mr. Prabowo, thank you for being willing to be speaker for the Geothermal Class event today with the theme Geoscience for Geothermal Exploration. I would like say thank you to the CE division and all activity leaders who prepare this event very well. I want to thank you, the APG members, and all of you who attend this event. APG competition is a new program designed by CE division of APG Unpad Student Chapter as a forum for members to gain new knowledge, especially in the energy sector. This first APG competition will bring Geothermal Class. Besides that, the competition enhancement division also help members to prepare themselves to become delegates for competition. Because as we know that the theme of this event, geothermal, is widely presented in various competitions. It hopes that with this event, everyone can gain knowledge in the field of energy and be more enthusiastic about making achievement in various competition for APG, and therefore I hope that all of you can focus on this event, listen carefully to the speaker materials, and ask questions that you don't understand. Hopefully, By participating this activity, all of you will be more enthusiastic about preparing to become future petroleum geologists. Last but not least, APG is the best platform to increase your capability in academic and non-academic skill. I'm sorry if there are any mistake in my speech. Thank you. I'm Adit. Back to you, Nunik. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you to Mr. Albert Bayu Aditya for the welcoming speech. Before we start the main agenda, I will read the profile of our today's speakers. Okay, first I will read the profile from Mr. Christovik Simatupang. He was the geochemistry supervisor in 2017 and 2020 at Sarul Operation Ltd. In 2020, worked at Star Energy as geochemistry external peer assist, and also in 2020 worked as chief operating officer in I-Lima and geochemistry advisor in UCAS Geotechnology. In 2021, as senior earth scientist at KS Orca Renewable. In 2022 until 2023 as earth science manager at KS Orca Renewable. And in 2020 until now, Mr. Christovik Simatupang worked as geothermal advisor in Baker Hughes. Okay, now I will read the profile from Mr. Ken Prabowo. In 2015 until 2018, he was the junior geologist at Petroleum ITB. In 2018 until 2022, as well simulator engineer at Baker Hughes. In 2021 until 2022, as operation coordinator at Baker Hughes. And in 2022, until now, Mr. Ken Prabowo worked as senior production technologist at Baker Hughes. There are so many experiences that are really amazing from our speakers today. So without any further ado, the first session is going to start now. We will learn about the geoscience for geothermal exploration, and for Mr. Christovik Simatupang and Mr. Ken Prabowo, the time and place is yours.
Okay, thank you. So, will it be delivered in English or in Bahasa? I'm after you guys, because most of the committee open in English, but and most of the participants, if I notice here, most of them are Indonesian, so I'm after you. Hello? So it be in English or in Bahasa? The committee, please.
Okay. Mister, you can use Bahasa to better conversation. Thank you.
Right. So ya, oke. Selamat malam teman-teman semua. Ya, terima kasih perkenalannya. Terima kasih untuk mempercayakan kami, saya dan Ken Prabowo untuk mendeliver topik terkait Geoscience for Geothermal Exploration and Development. Jadi slide ini kita siapkan untuk adik-adik, mudah-mudahan dapat membantu untuk memahami apa peran geoscience di geothermal eksplorasi dan juga development-nya. Nanti selanjutnya rekan saya, Ken Prabowo, akan memaparkan terkait dengan apa saja teknologi yang ada di geothermal dan untuk mengatasi challenges yang dihadapi di geothermal itu sendiri. Oke, jadi agendanya untuk 90 menit ke depan, saya akan usahakan untuk mendeliver 15 menit terkait dengan geothermal exploration, case studies 15 menit, kemudian kita lanjut lagi dengan geothermal development 15 menit, dan kemudian kita akan lanjutkan dengan another case studies related sama geothermal development in 15 minutes, dan kemudian kita juga akan lanjutkan dengan teknologi geothermal yang dipaparkan oleh rekan saya Ken Prabowo selama 30 menit ya. Jadi a bit introduction.
Yes. Sorry, excuse excuse me to interrupt. Is it possible for you to speak in English, because it's not understandable for me if you carry on with Bahasa?
Oh, okay. So, all right. So yeah, I will deliver in English. So it's okay. Sorry. I noticed that I thought majority are are Indonesian. Okay, I'll deliver in English. Sure.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Let me share my screen. So, can everyone see my screen now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let me repeat my introduction. So yeah. So basically, before I begin, I will start with the Geoscience for Geothermal Exploration and Development, and I would like to really bring up the small paragraph that I put at the top of my slides. So if you notice that I put that the reliability and accuracy of subsurface predictions are undermined by ubiquitous uncertainty, which arises from inadequate data, insufficient experience, bias of intention, and lack of communication. So these are the key elements that I've been observing within the past 15 years that I'm working in geothermal industry. So most of the times, since we are the subsurface personnel, so basically we are dealing with uncertainty. Why we call it uncertainty? Because we don't see by our naked eyes. So we are dealing with something beneath the surface ground, and we are trying to understand the condition and the characteristic beneath our feet in order to really able to harness energy from the subsurface. So that's why we are dealing with uncertainty, and we are trying to reduce the uncertainty itself by using science approach, engineering approach, and technology itself. And most of the time when I'm dealing with this, I always try have a challenging data quality. Like most of the data that I'm working on are data that collected from improper data acquisition process. So if we are having this kind of condition, for sure, we always believe that garbage in, garbage out. So if we are putting wrong data or improper data quality into our interpretation, then we are going to end up with wrong interpretation. So that's why I really put this one into the key point of my talk, that the inadequate data is one of the challenging that I'm facing within the 15 years I'm working in geothermal. And the other thing is that insufficient experience. So most of the cases that I've been seeing in the industry, some of the subsurface personnel, usually they probably start with like a fresh graduate, like I used to when I 15 years back in my career. So in the first time when I joined the industry, I still have insufficient experience. But at the time, I was very lucky that I got a proper mentor. So at that time, I was mentored by a very highly experienced personnel from geothermal industry. So I was very lucky, and then I got a proper training in order to really speed up and catching up with the proper knowledge in order to really enable me to interpret all the data that given to me. And the other thing is that the bias of intention. So somehow, most of the subsurface personnel usually they have bias in interpreting data. For example, when we know that geothermal here is not a geothermal research. Most of the companies that exist here in industry are a company that has a financial background. For sure, they want to invest in this industry. So in order to really ensure that they get a return in terms of finance, that's why they need to ensure that the cost when they want to run a project in geothermal must be economically viable. So when the geothermal project itself is really dictated by the economic itself, try to make sure that the project is economic, then somehow the interpretation itself can lead into the wrong direction, and somehow it can be biased. So that's why it's very critical to really define the objective of the study and try also to capture not only from research point of view, but also from the finance point of view itself, from the economic standpoint. That's why it's very critical to really ensure that there's no bias in the intention when we interpret the data. And lastly, the lack of communication. And most of the cases I've been seeing also that most of the geothermal practitioners in subsurface, they have probably communicate not really often. So the geophysicists, for example, probably they only concentrate on their data. And when they find any anomaly in their data, they probably not try to integrate their anomaly with the other anomaly from other discipline. For example, when they see there is a micro earthquake events from the MEQ when they interpret the data, then they probably not try to integrate the anomaly that they observe in the micro earthquake with, for example, geochemical data, because when they see any anomaly, they need to ask themselves and also try to ask other disciplines like the geochemist and also reservoir engineer whether they see the same anomaly that will support any observation that they do on their data. So that's why I really stress out all of the key things when we play our role as a geoscientist when we are doing our job in geothermal exploration stage and geothermal development stage. Okay, now I move on to the main topic itself. So I will put it in presentation mode. Can anybody see the screen in not really clear? So everybody can see it clearly?
Sure.
Okay, I assume, yeah, okay. I assume everybody can see it clearly. Okay, so I will continue. So the first question is that since most of the subsurface personnel actually, I mean, most of them are oil and gas background, and the industry that really growing within the past 15 years or 100 years, I think, is oil and gas. And it's very critical. I put the comparison of geothermal with oil and gas because I believe during this energy transition, most of the subsurface personnel from oil and gas, they try to shift their career to geothermal. And it's very important for me to really make a bridge in order to make them understand what is the similarities and what are the differences. So in the similarities, I will start with this. So the produced fluid from subsurface reservoir is also through wells. So that's the similarities. So in oil and gas, the one that being produced is oil and gas, while in geothermal, the one that being produced is brine and steam. So usually in reservoir, in oil and gas, we will encounter water at the base of the reservoir. At the top of the water, we are going to see oil, and the top of the oil, there will be gas. But in the case of geothermal, that will be different. At the base of the reservoir, we are going to see brine or water. And then at the top of the brine itself, we are going to see steam. And at the top of the steam, we are going to see gas, non-condensable gas, what we call as NCG, right? So there are three phases of fluids, and all of them will be produced from the wells. And in oil and gas, some of the cases, the fluid is being injected back into the reservoir, and as well as in geothermal, it's very critical that we also inject back the produced fluid from the production well into the injection well, just to ensure that the reservoir get a sufficient pressure support from the injection wells. So that's why we call geothermal as a renewable energy and sustainable energy, because we ensure there is a continuous loop where we produce and we also inject back to the reservoir. And the other one is the surface piping and fluid handling facilities. So I think we also use the same configuration, almost similar in terms of surface piping and also the fluid handling facilities, how we store the fluid and also how we use the energy, extract the energy from the fluid itself. In the case of oil, the oil and gas itself as the product that being commercially used, while in geothermal, the fluid itself is just as a media to transfer the heat from the reservoir into the surface. So we basically don't use the fluid itself, but we just use the heat from the fluid. So that would be a different case, okay? And the next one, it would be the business process. In this case, the business process is almost similar. There's no much difference between geothermal and oil and gas. While in the differences, for sure, we are going to talk about the temperatures. When we talk about geothermal, we are talking about high temperature. When we talk about oil and gas, we are talking about low to medium temperature. So that's why this could be a challenge for any company like Baker Hughes, Schlumberger, Halliburton, the company who provide technology, then any technology that usually applied in oil and gas and try to be absorbed and try to be implemented back to geothermal and try to be introduced to geothermal, then those companies need to really do homework in how they improve the temperature limitation of the equipment or tools or any technology that they're going to introduce to geothermal market. So temperatures is going to be a big issue. Next one, the differences is the blind drilling in production hole section. So in oil and gas, blind drilling is avoidable, while in geothermal, blind drilling is really something that we are after. So we really need to find losses in order to ensure that we really penetrate into the reservoir, because in geothermal, what we are dealing with is a fracture zones. In fractures, we call it as secondary porosity, while in oil and gas, most of the cases, the permeability itself is the primary porosity, which is the rock itself. Okay, and the other thing is the significantly less carbon and toxic gas emissions. So in oil and gas, I think when we are talking about, let's say, H2S or carbon, the concentration is significantly higher. Like we are talking about greater than 500,000 ppm. While in geothermal, when we are talking about these two gases, carbon and sulfuric acid, sulfuric hydrogen, then we are going to talk about concentration lower than 500,000 ppm. So that's why we call geothermal as environmental friendly energy. Okay, and the next one is spatialized surveillance techniques. So in most cases, geochemistry is not really something that is really used or utilized in oil and gas. Most of the cases during the surveillance, the one that really used is related with geology and geophysics. While in geothermal, when we enter the development stage, from geoscience point of view, geoscience can contribute through geochemistry monitoring. So in most cases, geochemistry will play a major role, significant role in development stage of geothermal. That would be totally different with oil and gas. Ken probably can talk more detail on oil and gas, but geochemistry is not really playing major role in oil and gas. But geophysics also play another role, another contribution to surveillance things related with microseismic and microgravity. But these two are not really something that is considered to be something that must have, because when we are talking about geothermal is still struggling with the tariffs the tariffs here in Indonesia. I'm not sure with the one outside of Indonesia, but I'm sure they also face the same challenge. In Indonesia, the tariff is not really favoring the geothermal developers. So that's why it is very important to ensure that the surveillance itself, the cost is economic and straight to the point where what we are really after. So that's why geochemistry, since the geochemistry surveillance is the cost is less as compared with microseismic and microgravity monitoring. So geochemistry monitoring is favored by most of the geothermal developers. And reservoir characterization in oil and gas, seismic is very important, but in geothermal it is not. And reservoir production mechanism include the heat mining. So we are talking about in geothermal, talking about thermal recharge and thermal decline, while in oil and gas, we don't really talk about it. Okay, so I cannot really go into the details because of time limitation. I need to cover so many topics, so that's why I need to speed it up. Okay, so these are the key points, what we really after during each stage. So as I already mentioned in the earlier, that we are going to talk about two stages in geothermal, the exploration stage and development stage. In the exploration stage, these are the key points that we need to answer during the exploration itself. So the first one is how hot. We are talking about the heat. We are talking about harnessing the heat. So that's why it's very important to really answer how hot the system is. What is the temperature that we are going to deal with? Okay, because we are going to talk about to convert the heat from the certain degree Celsius into megawatts, right? And second one is how permeable. When we are talking about permeability, then it's very important to ensure that the fluid, the reservoir itself can really contain the liquid, where the liquid itself is going to be the media to transfer the heat from the reservoir into the wellhead and into the surface facilities to generate the electricity. Okay. And the next important question is fluid benign. Why this question is very important? Because we've been seeing so many cases in geothermal project, for example, in Mount Apo in the Philippines, that projects came to end because of the acid fluid production. I think they drilled about 9 wells in Mount Apo in the Philippines in 1990s, but the project cannot really go into the development stage because all the 9 wells end up with acid fluid production. And when they try to calculate the project economic at the time, then they really cannot make the project economic. That's why they turn down the project and they cancel everything. So that's why it's very important in advance, as geoscientists, we need to really find out whether the fluid is benign or the fluid is acidic. Okay, and the next question would be how big the reservoir is. This is very important because we are going to deal with energy extraction within certain period of time as per contract with the government. So if usually in geothermal we are going to deal with 30 years contract. So within 30 years we need to ensure the megawatt that we state as a resource capacity should be able to sustain the generation of that megawatt within that long period of time, within the 30 years. So if we miss in defining how big the reservoir is, then we are going to end up with a failure project. So that's why it's very important we define the megawatts by considering that we are going to extract the heat within 30 years, within the long contract. Okay. Next one, development stage. In development stage, after we drill well. So if you can see on the slide, I put a cartoon here. So let's say the 2 wells on the left, let's say these are the production wells, and 1 well on the right that connected to the surface facility, let's say that's the injection well. So it's very important for us to really understand when we put production wells at that location, how the reservoir will behave. Will the steam cap be developed, or steam cap cannot be developed? And how many wells that we need to drill to really generate a steam cap, where it will be of like 5 to 10 wells be enough to generate steam cap. And we need to anticipate the steam cap development, because it's very critical to really define the reservoir pressure in advance and try to anticipate any reservoir pressure drop due to the mass extraction that could lead to the steam cap development. In one way, steam cap is good, but in the other way, if we cannot really sustain the pressure drop because of the steam cap development, because the liquid level drop, then we might suffer with excessive production decline. Okay, that's why it will be also related with the second bullets that I put here, is pressure support provided by the injection. So yeah, we need really to be able to understand where we need to put the injection wells. We need to ensure the injection wells that we put in the reservoir area is not really too close to the production well, and also is not really too far from the production area. If it is too close, then we know that there will be cooling and there will be scaling that created by this injection breakthrough. Or if we put it too far from the production area, then there will be no support from the injection wells to the production wells, where this situation could also lead to excessive production decline. Okay, and the other thing is that we need also to balance the extraction. We don't want to only extract at similar depth. We need to balance the extraction. So we need to ensure that certain production wells extract at certain level of reservoir, let's say at the shallower section, and the other wells also extract in the deeper section. So there is a balance between the shallow level and also the deep level. This is very important, because if we extract at the same level, it will also lead to excessive production decline. And we need also to anticipate any scaling and corrosion due to this development strategy. And we need also to anticipate if there is any change in the surface manifestation in the hot spring or in the steam fans, because we are dealing with a geothermal where most of the geothermal fields in Indonesia, it is located close to where the local people are living. So it's very important that we need to ensure that we don't cause any harm to the environment when we operate the geothermal production. Okay. Okay. It's very. So yeah, I will skip this one. The basic exploration strategies, we need to look from surface to depth. We need to ensure we always appreciate the uncertainty and always use low to high cost. So we don't always favor the high technology and then it will end up with very high cost, but always to consider that is there any low cost technology that could also assist us in trying to reduce the uncertainty of the subsurface. Okay, and consider risk and economics, and always put it in mind that we are dealing with possibility of acid fluid, oversaturated brine. So keep in mind that we need to check them. Okay, and always when we do that kind of surveillance activities and also the exploration activities, always keep in mind that we don't want to cause the project leading to a failure project due to the overrun cost or excessive cost because of their surveillance activities and exploration activities. Okay, and always apply conceptual models throughout, from the beginning to the end of the project. So conceptual models is not a fixed model. Conceptual models is a models that is always updated whenever we got a new data. So if we have, let's say, only 5 data, then we need to honor any conclusion that made from 5 data will lead to a certain degree of understanding. If we get more data, let's say from 5 set of data, we get another data, let's say now we have 10 set of data, then we are going to update the conceptual model, and we are going to have better understanding by having more data. Okay, always appreciate that and always communicate this one to the management, because management, most of them probably may not have a technical background. Most of them probably have a different background, not really technical. So that's why it's very important to make them understand that we are dealing with these kind of things. Okay. Okay. The key questions about the how hot, then yeah, we are talking about geological features, geothermal matters, and heat source. And how permeable, we are talking about rock types, structures, and fluid flow. And when we're talking about fluid benign, we are talking about gas and liquid geochemistry, and also hydrothermal alteration. As we know that hydrothermal alteration is the product of the reaction between fluid and rocks. So the fluid itself will bring specific temperatures. So let's say the 200 degrees Celsius, if it reacts with rocks, with certain rocks, then it will create a certain hydrothermal alteration. So that's why I put here hydrothermal alteration is also important to be able to also play a role in answering all the quick questions in exploration. Not only the temperature, but also in the fluid chemistry. So if the fluid is acidic, when it reacts with rocks, for sure it will also deposit specific minerals as compared with a benign fluid when it reacts with certain rocks. Okay, and how big? When we are talking about how big, we are talking about the combination of the alteration itself, because alteration will be the footprint of the fluid when the fluid is moving from one place to another place, from the upflow to the outflow. So that's why alteration is also playing important role in order to help us to define the reservoir boundary. Okay, and distribution of thermal features as a evidence of the fluid that is reaching up to the surface, and also geophysical constraints. Okay, I will skip this one because of the time. Okay, field work. Now we are going to start with this kind of scheme. So usually when we are trying to perform any exploration job, geothermal exploration work, then we are going to start with literature study, as shown by the chart on the upper left. Okay, and after we collect all the literature data, the published paper, the published reports, then we are going to try to create our preliminary conceptual model. And then once we understand the model that we are going to deal with, the system or the geothermal field that we are going to deal with, then we are going to define the field work. We are going to develop a certain field work in order to help us to collect data and try to understand what we are going to deal with during the exploration drilling. Okay, after that, we are going to, after we collect the data, we are going to share the data with the laboratory analysis and data processing. For data processing, so we are going to have the data be ready for interpretation. And once the interpretation is performed, then we are going to develop the conceptual model, and it will be ended with risk evaluation. We are trying to anticipate any risk, and we are trying to prepare the mitigation plan in order to deal with this potential risk. Okay, and we are going to continue with discussion and review. We are going to discuss and have other peers to review our work, because as I mentioned, geoscience, we are going to deal with uncertainty and risk. It's very, and bias is there. That's why very important for us to have a review from other persons in order to ensure that we capture everything, we don't miss anything. Okay, and we are going to end up with report and decision. That's why it's always important to keep in mind garbage in, garbage out. It's very important to perform QA/QC throughout the activities. And in the field work, these are the activities that the geologist will do: rock sampling, S dating, structural analysis, surface thermal manifestation, and hydrothermal alteration mapping. And for the geochemist, collect the fluid samples from the surface manifestation and have the samples be ready for gas analysis, liquid analysis, and isotope analysis. Okay, and for the geophysicist, they go to the field by bringing all the equipments related with the empty survey and gravity survey. And once the data collected, then we have the data be sent to a laboratory for petrography analysis, XRD, H dating, structural analysis, for geochemistry, for sure, as I mentioned before, for gas, liquid, and isotope, and geophysics for empty and gravity. And for geology interpretation, these are the questions that are going to be answered: the how hot, how permeable. So the geology interpretation also will contribute to the question of fluid benign and how big. Okay, sorry, I need to make it fast because there are a lot of topics that I'm going to cover. So next, we are going to continue with geophysics. For geophysics, we are talking about how big. So all the collected data related with this the TDEM and also EM, then we call it as a clay cap interpretation. Then we are going to define the reservoir size from the distribution of the anomaly of the resistivity. Okay, and in the same time, we are going to also check the distribution of this resistivity anomaly with geological data, such as from the alteration, right? So usually there is a good consistency between smectite and argillic alteration with the anomaly in resistivity. So that's why it's very important for us to check and try to communicate with other disciplines to ensure that our interpretation is correct. Okay. And geophysics will answer all these questions: how hot, how permeable, and how big, from all this data as listed in the chart. Okay, from density changes to ensure that whether we are at the right place where the intrusive body is located, because the density will respond to the anomaly in temperature. Okay, and fault and structure strengths also can be dictated from geophysical data, and also we also try to interpret the basement of the reservoir. Why it is important to interpret the basement of the reservoir? Because we are going to estimate the reservoir capacity by interpreting the top of the reservoir and the bottom of the reservoir. It is always a practice in geothermal where the basement of the reservoir will be used as the bottom of the reservoir and is usually related with the basement rocks. And this will be, I will skip this one. For geochemistry interpretation, these are the species that we are going to use in order to understand the questions, to answer all the questions, the key question in exploration. For example, the how permeable. So in order to ensure that we know where the fluid is flowing from which location to which location, then we are going to use all these chemical species in order to understand that kind of fluid flow model. Okay, and how hot? We know that geothermometry has been used as a practice before we drill any wells to really identify the reservoir temperature. So that's why it's very important for us to utilize this technique in order to help us to answer the questions of how hot. So we are going to define the reservoir temperature by using the chemistry. And from all the geochemical data, we are going to develop this interpretation as shown by the chart. So on the left, we'll be showing the map view, how the fluid flows. In this case, we have two upflows interpreted, and then the fluid is flowing like the one that's shown by the arrows. And we also develop the vertical section in order to understand how the fluid flows in the vertical section. So we usually create not only one model, but also two models to appreciate the uncertainty in the reservoir. Okay. And when we develop the conceptual model, we try to integrate all the data. So we integrate the geological data, geochemical data, and geophysical data, and try to develop this one as shown by the chart over here. So we try to define the clay cap as the one of the key elements in geothermal. If there's no clay cap, there will be no geothermal system. So that's why we we try to define the clay cap in order to help us to understand the distribution of the reservoir, and then try to integrate the reservoir rocks. We try to define what kind of rock types that we are dealing with. So it will help us to understand the nature of the reservoir itself when we do the drilling, the exploration drilling. So we know what we expect during the drilling. Okay, and in the same time, we also need to understand the temperature itself. So in order to help us to estimate the resource capacity. And next one, we are going to draw fluid flow model. So try to understand how the fluid is moving from its source to the outflow. Okay, when we set the exploration drilling, then we are going to deal with what type of wells that we are going to drill in the exploration stage. So yeah, I just moved to here. So remember, in the exploration, there are 4 questions that we need to answer, right? So the first one is how hot, the second one is how permeable, the last one is how is fluid benign, and the last one is how big. So let's say we already collected all the geoscientific data. We already got the geology data from the surface mapping, from the surface data collection, and we also already got the geochemistry data from the surface manifestation, and we already got the geophysical data from all the stations that we put at the surface. When we integrate it, we try to answer all the key questions that I already mentioned before, right? There are 4 questions. So let's say from all the data, we cannot really pinpoint, we cannot really answer, and we cannot really reduce the uncertainty in the question, let's say, related with how is fluid benign, okay? If we cannot really answer is the question related with is fluid benign, then it will help us to define what type of wells that we need to drill. You probably hear about slim hole. Many practitioners out there always say, oh, well, during the exploration, the slim hole is the best one. No, I will strongly say no, not necessarily. It really depends on the questions. If the collected data cannot answer the question related is fluid benign, what is the point drilling the slim hole? When we drill slim hole, we cannot collect any fluid from the well. So if we drill slim hole while we know that we cannot answer is fluid benign, then it will be a useless well, because in slim hole we cannot flow the well. So that's why it's very important to answer all the questions, try to understand the questions, and then set type of wells later after we are able to collect all the geoscientific data. So if the questions, let's say we are able to answer the question related is fluid benign from the collected data from the manifestation. So if that is the case, and the question that we cannot answer is, let's say, related is how hot, for example, then yes, slim hole will be the best well in exploration to be drilled, because in slim hole, we are able to collect temperature data. So we don't need to collect any fluid from the slim hole because we already got the answer from the surface manifestation. That's why it's very important to understand the key questions that already put in the beginning of the exploration in order to help us to define what type of wells that we need to drill in the exploration stage. Okay, that will be the key points that I need to stress out. Okay, now we move on to case studies. The case studies, I will put it very quick. Yeah, if you really want to see all these whole package of interpretation, you can, I think there is a record about my presentation here in student chapter of Trisakti, if I'm not mistaken, in YouTube. They put it in YouTube, so you can see the detail of my presentation there. Okay, so yeah, I will make it really quick on the study case. So let's say we have a prospect, we call it Monrinci. So there is a bidding process, and let's say we just play like a game, right? So there's a Department of Energy like EBTKE, like MEMR in Indonesia, EBTKE. So let's say we call it DUPIK, Department of Energy, and they announced there's a bidding of Monrinci prospect, and they opened it already. Okay, and let's say Hamonangan Geothermal Company has decided to participate, and they are interested to invest in Dufik. Okay, and the bid document is shared to the interested companies, and they let them to conduct 3D survey prior decision to move to the next bidding stage. And let's say the Hamonewan Geothermal Company got the data from the EBTKE, from the Dufik Energy Department of Energy, and these are the four key data that try to summarize. So the first one is Mount Rinci last eruption was 700,000 to 70,000 years ago. Okay, and it is considered extinct as no volcanic activity was recorded since its last eruption. Okay, and they also stated in the report that several andesitic dacitic lava domes are observed in the northern of Mount Rinci. So shown here. So there are black circle over here. These are the lava domes. And age dating results shows that Mount Rinci is younger than the lava dome. So this Mount Rinci over here is younger than the lava domes in the north. Okay. And the next one is the structure trend is dominantly northeast southwest, as shown by all the lines that drawn here. Okay. And the spring and gas shift are manifested in the northern of Mount Rinci, as shown by the circle, red circle, as shown in the picture. And we also notice that this prospect is located close to the sea, close to the Gulf. Okay, so it's very important also to note this one, because we know we are going to deal with reservoir water, geothermal water, which we call as brine. Brine itself usually identified as a water that is very concentrated in chloride, and we know that seawater also has the same characteristic. Seawater usually also has a anomaly in chloride concentration. So it's very important to notice that there is a seawater nearby, and we also notice that there's possibility for the seawater intrude or infiltrate into the reservoir and may give an impact to the geothermal reservoir in Mount Rinci prospect. Okay. So as I mentioned before, we are going to use this kind of workflow. So we are going to start with literature study. So from the literature study, after we obtain the data from the government, now we conduct the literature study. So let's say we try to download all the papers, the published papers related with Mount Rinci, and also any textbook, geothermal textbook, and we try to understand what kind of geothermal system that we are going to deal with. Okay, so in here I grabbed these two models from Inge Mook that published in 2014. So Inge Mook create this geothermal conceptual model really well, and I think her models that are published in that paper really capture all the potential models that we are going to deal with in geothermal systems. So on the left side is the system where the geothermal is being formed by the volcanic activity. So there is no intrusive body. So there's only an active volcano nearby, and it keep on discharging all the volcanic gases and volcanic fluids. While on the right side, we can see that in this model, there is a intrusive body nearby, while there's also an active volcano. So we try to see from the information that we obtain from the government, which model that will represent best this prospect before we go to the field. Because when we obtain the data from the government, we will not only use that data and 100% trust all the data that given by the government, but we need to also to check, go to the field, try to collect data, try to validate all the data that given by the government, and try to check all the any anomaly or any interesting spots that we need really to check and visit, try to understand the geological condition, right? And when we go to the field, we collect the data during the data acquisition process stage. Then now we understand that the model on the right before is probably the best model to really represent this prospect, because the one on the left doesn't really show any intrusive body, while we got the information there is a dome, there is intrusive body that detected at the surface in the north of Mount Rinci. So we think there is the model on the right side over here would best represent best the prospect in Mount Rinci. Okay, and I just put it as a another thing that probably become really a reality when we really do the exploration activity. Somehow, when we do the exploration activity, we are going to face with the non-technical problems. For example, in this case, there are like protests or any demonstration from the local people that will say no to the geothermal development in that specific area. So that's why somehow we really need to push back ourselves and try to engage the local community and make them understand what we are going to do here is not something that's going to harm the environment and not to harm them. So we need to make them understand that this is a renewable energy, very low emission gas, and we need to really to engage them to understand them, to make them understand and try to make them aware that this is a safe energy. Okay, and okay, this is the Mount Rinci prospect. So let's say we already collected all the data, geological, geophysical, geochemical, and we try to draw and try to interpret the collected data. So we got the topography. So we try to create a contour maps here to really understand the elevation of the prospect. Try to understand where the high elevation area and where is the lower elevation area, and try to combine with the geophysical data that we got. So let's say we got the low resistivity anomaly data less than 10 ohm meters. We try to draw it just to understand where the distribution of the clay cap, as I mentioned, the clay cap usually defined by the low resistivity anomaly. And we also try to combine with geological data from all the geological mapping at the surface. We try to understand which fault that is really playing major role in this prospect. Then we draw it. And another fault that probably interpreted to really understand the geological situation of the prospect, another faults, and another fault over here, and try to plot also the surface manifestation. So we separate the symbols for the springs and also the symbols for the gas seep. Okay, and try to also appreciate any geological anomalies related with the presence of intrusive body related with lava domes. And we try to check with the geophysics. So that's why in the beginning I also mentioned about communication is important. So when we detect the geophysicist says that, oh, from our density gravity surface, we noticed there is an anomaly in the density body in these two areas, and the geologist will check. Oh yeah, when I visited area, the geologist said that, oh yeah, from the outcrops, we do see that there is a intrusive rocks there, and it's very consistent then we are going to conclude that it's valid, that we suspect these two areas potentially could be a heat source of the system, right? And the fluid chemistry collected, then we try to put it here and try to understand the fluid characteristic of the reservoir fluid. And we try to plot all these fluids into the ternary diagram, try to understand the reservoir processes that is going on in the reservoir and how the fluid brings all this information up to the surface. And so basically, if the fluid chemistry plotted over here, then it will tell us something. So the one that plotted in the corner of chloride will indicate reservoir fluid, while the one that plotted away will indicate process like boiling, mixing, or condensation. Okay, and another plots that we usually use the sodium, potassium, magnesium, try to define the reservoir temperature, and then we define, okay, well, we calculate the reservoir temperature and we come up with these numbers, and these are the techniques that we are going to use. And the sodium potassium ratio usually indicate the temperature related with temperature sources, while the quartz adiabatic will indicate the temperature of the in situ reservoir. For example, if the sample is collected, let's say, from this location, from these springs, if we drill vertically down below, then we are going to encounter temperature that's shown by the quartz. But if we drill away from this spring and close to the source of the fluid, then we are going to expect temperature up to 300. So that's how we read the geothermometry. Okay, that's how we understand the geothermometry. Okay, but be careful, yeah. So many things, many cases out there in the industry, I've been observing that some technical practitioners usually use the sodium potassium to dictate reservoir temperature beneath the spring itself. It's wrong, yeah. Never ever use the sodium potassium to dictate reservoir temperature beneath the spring. Okay, fact check. Okay, these are the key questions: how hot, how permeable is fluid benign, how big, where to drill. So these are the questions that we need to answer in geothermal exploration. What is the hypothetical play? Extinct volcano with plutonium setting. How hot? The geology says that there is a presence of lava domes and structures connected with domes and extinct volcano, meaning that the structure may play a major role as a pathway for the fluid to moving from the source to the outflow. The geophysics says that the gravity anomaly observed at the lava domes. Geochemistry says that sodium potassium geothermometer indicates outflow temperature up to 300. So in this case, I can surely say that in terms of how hot, we can really have high confidence in answering that the question of how hot, it is very 100% sure we are going to encounter high temperature system. Okay, no issue. When we try to answer the questions of how permeable, then the geology and geochemistry data says that, okay, the association of faults with heat source location and boiling chloride spring. So if there's a connection, so let's say I move back. So this is the suspected heat source, these two locations over here. And the fault seems to connect this location with the presence of the hot spring at the surface over here in the north. So we can suspect the fault itself will be the pathway of the fluid to move from the heat source up to the north, from the deep in the south, moving upward, ascending to the surface, to the shallow part through this wall. So what does it mean? It means that there is a permeability down there that allow this liquid to move from the source into the manifestation at the surface. So meaning that we can suspect that we are going to deal with permeability, a good permeability. Okay. Next question is fluid benign. So from the chemistry, we can see that there is no issue with acid fluid based on this. But however, we should suspect the anomaly in the sulfate, as shown by Intani Gasip and Graha spring over here, may indicate there's a possibility that there is an acidic fluid that is flowing somewhere in the southern part over here through this fault, or through this fault, through wherever fault over here. So that's why we need to anticipate and to address there's a possibility that the acid fluid may present when we drill a well in this prospect, when we lower down the pressure in the reservoir and invite any fluid outside to coming in. Okay. How big? How big? We are going to talk about geophysical data mostly, as that play the major role. But geology and geochemistry try to support the analysis of the geophysical data, and from the hydrothermal alteration and surface manifestation, also geophysical anomaly, then we can conclude we are pretty sure the black line over here already represent the reservoir boundary. Okay. And now the next question is where to drill. Now let's translate this multidisciplinary interpretation and integrate them all into a conceptual model prior locating the first well to drill. Okay. Now, if you are asked to drill a well, where is the location that we are going to drill? For sure, we are going to drill over here. Okay, sorry. Here, and we are going to drill over here. At least in the exploration stage, we cannot drill only one well. If we drill one well, we cannot flow the well, because when we flow the well, we need to ensure the fluid that being produced from one well need to be injected back to the reservoir, because we don't want to create or to affect any harmful activity to the environment. If we don't have two wells, then we cannot flow the well, because when we flow the well, we need to ensure the fluid that being produced not to be dumped into the river or into the surface. We need to ensure any fluid produced should be injected back to the reservoir. So remember, in exploration, if we want to flow the well to collect data with related with fluid chemistry and fluid characteristic, we need to ensure we have at least two wells. If we only have one well, don't flow the well. Okay. Okay. Then we are going to drill these two wells, and then we are going to create the conceptual model. And from the well data, now we are sure that we are going to deal with this kind of system. We have 300 degrees Celsius as mentioned by the geochemistry data. And from the well data, we find out that the well that drill over here penetrate into 250 degrees Celsius and close to the heat source is. And we also notice that the well that drill close to the springs is wells that close to the outflow of the system. Okay. Sorry, I'm really caught by the time, so I think I cannot really deliver everything in this moment. So yeah, now let's discuss what is the takeaways from the activity that we just had. So as the 3G exploration team lead, let's say you are assigned as a 3G exploration team lead, what will you do as you are going to present to the board of the directors? Remember, you have to make them understand and their background. Not all of them are technical background. Most of them are probably just finance background, or probably they come from technical background, but they already left technical things for quite some time. So they probably not really remember everything related with technicals, and probably they have other perspective and other point of view. So you have to make them understand that when you deliver the technical information, it's also something that they could relate with. Okay. And what are the risks and uncertainties that you have observed in this prospect? Remember, you always address these risks and uncertainties, because it's important for us to make an advanced mitigation plan in order to deal with this potential risk, and also to reduce uncertainties in the next drilling activities. Okay, because we need really to reduce the uncertainty by drilling wells throughout all the project. Okay, how do you constrain them? Then what could have gone better? This would be the question that we need to ask to ourselves and keep in mind. Okay. I'm sorry, I cannot cover really the geothermal development case studies, but probably I can only share the geothermal development case by moving to this slide. And sorry, Ken, I probably can leave you another 15 minutes to share your materials, but yeah, I will try to catch up. So the exploration stage, I try to download this one from the paper that published. You can download it. So this one is actually Tongonan geothermal field in the Philippines. So in the Philippines, there are two reservoirs that observed during the exploration. And as you can see over here, this area over here is actually the resistivity anomaly. There are two resistivity anomalies separated and not connected. So meaning there are two different reservoirs and in one prospect. So the one on the north called Tongonan, and the one in the south is Mahanakdong Reservoir. And from the 3G survey, they conclude that the reservoir in the north is neutral, benign, while the one in the southern part is acidic. And the one in the north is bigger than the one in the south. And the as of today, I think they already drilled so many wells, and they generate from Tongonan Reservoir is around close to 700 megawatt in total. Okay. And we need to see what they are dealing with during the development stage. During the exploration stage, before we go to the development stage. So as I mentioned, let's focus on this one. So these are the outflow interpreted during the exploration stage, and the fluid flow is interpreted like this. So the fluid goes up to the north from the central outflow in the Maihau, and then goes to the southern part. But it is not connected with the one in the Manakdong area. So they define there is three types of reservoir clusters. The one in the north called Upper Maihau, while the one in the center called Tongonan 1, and the one in the southern part called Malitbok or Sambaloran. Okay. In the exploration stage, they also already drilled so many wells, I think close to more than 100 wells. And they have injection wells in the north. They have another injection wells in the south. So they separate brine and condensate. Brine is injected in the northern and in the western part, and also in the southern part, while the condensate is injected in the northern part. Condensate has lower temperature compared to brine, so that's why they put the condensate away from the reservoir as compared to the brine. Brine has temperature still high, around 150 to 160, while the condensate has temperature around 60 degrees Celsius to 70 degrees Celsius. So imagine if this cold fluid put closer to the production area, then it will cool down the reservoir. Okay. So in the develop, sorry, probably this is typo, is supposedly development stage. So in the development stage, what they observe, there is an injection breakthrough by wells that shown by the red lines, the orange lines over here. So wells that drawn in the orange color are actually wells that experience injection breakthrough, cooling due to injection, and wells that drawn by a pink color over here are wells that experience condensate injection breakthrough. Okay, and wells that drawn over here in the gray color are wells that experience due to the marginal reaches or peripheral liquid invasion. Okay, and they also experience scaling because they lower the temperature of the brine, as shown by here the chart. These are the temperature and these are the silica concentration in the x-axis. So when we lower the temperature, we usually will change the saturation of the brine, and the saturation of the brine because of this low temperature will result to oversaturated condition. Okay, as shown over here, let's say this is the reservoir characteristic. Let's say we are dealing with 300 degrees Celsius temperature. When we lower the temperature, then we are going to drag this point down to the section. If we lower the temperature to the condition where the silica concentration already exceed the saturation condition, then we are going to have a scaling. So this is the principle of scaling. So that's why it's very important we communicate with the engineers when they try to design the power plant, when they try to extract the heat from the brine. We need to remind them as a geoscientist that they, for example, in this case, they cannot really lower the temperature lower than 200 degrees Celsius or lower than 180 degrees Celsius, because when they lower the temperature of the brine below 180, then they are going, or we are going to deal with scaling deposition. And we need, if we don't have any option, let's say they say, oh well, if we don't lower the temperature to that numbers, then we cannot generate a megawatt that already agreed with the government. For example, we are in that situation. So if that is the case, then we also need to communicate with the management. Well, if that is the case, we need to anticipate that risk by communicating this one with any technology provider outside that can help us to deal with scaling problem, right? So we need to communicate with that, and we need to anticipate and prepare any chemical that we can use or any technique that we can use to really inhibit the scaling deposition when we are lowering the temperature of the brine to its oversaturated condition. So it's very important for us to communicate with the management, try to make them understand, and try to seek the solution. Okay, and that is scaling. So other than scaling, before I close the session, we also deal with cooler liquid. So when we are talking about cooler liquid, then we need to ensure we anticipate and we minimize the impact of the cooling, let's say by changing the injection strategy. If we notice that there are certain wells that already used for injection create or cause a significant impact or bad impact or negative impact to the nearby production, we need to communicate to the management that we need, in the next drilling campaign, we need to find other wells to replace the existing injection. Okay, that's one of the solutions. The other solution, let's say, well, we need to, let's say, we identify, we need to plug the feed zone at the deeper part in order to minimize the scale, the cooling effect from the injection wells. Then we propose workover, something like that. So there are a lot of ways, actually, in order to minimize any impact from cooling phenomenon that caused by the injection. Okay, that's the thing that the key point, the takeaways from this development stage. We need to anticipate the risk. If we are able to identify the risk, then we need to find a solution. And remember, there is no fixed solution to overcome the problem. Always keep in mind that the reservoir is dynamic. So if we drill another, let's say, this injection well over this production well over here doesn't have any effect related to injection. But if we drill, if we add more wells in this area, then we may also invite this cold liquid to coming in and to inflate the reservoir and try to get closer to the wells that probably located further away from the injection area. So always keep that in mind and try to remember that everything we do, there will be consequences. So always prepare the risk and try to reduce the uncertainties. That is the takeaways in sustaining geothermal development throughout the contract of the geothermal project. Okay, that will be all from me because I already consumed a lot of times. I need to spare my time with my colleagues, Ken Prabowo, to share our technology in Baker Hughes that can be used by the industry. So you probably already noticed, I already shared all the challenges that we are facing when we are doing the activity related with exploration and when we are doing the activities related with the production development during the development stage. So that's why when we are we already understand that the challenges that we are facing, then we are able to identify what kind of technology that probably suitable to really help us to overcome the challenges. Okay, my colleagues will share and will present. Ken Prabowo, I will let you to share your screen and start presenting. Time is yours.
Give me a second. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes, Ken, I can see it.
Right, but I think the committee asked me to speak in both English and Bahasa, so to accommodate most of the Indonesian here actually, because they probably already have a overflow of information from your presentation, Bang. So yeah, I will try to mix up with it between English and Bahasa over the course of the presentation. So anyhow, thank you for the opportunity. Amongst all, I picked actually the drilling technology, and we will just see how Baker Hughes technology is able to contribute to Indonesian geothermal development. So yeah, I'm starting off with the introduction again. Just to clarify, I'm actually my title is Senior Production Technologist and Chemist. I'm part of a division called Reservoir Technology Service. It's together with Christovik. Like Christovik mentioned before, I have a bachelor in geology and master in petroleum engineering. And this is the photo when I started out in Baker Hughes. So this is the old Baker Hughes logo. And yeah, I started as a field engineer that works in fracturing, acidizing, and I move on to coil tubing as well. So that's sort of I spent 4 years in the oil field to learn.
توام نامه چیز داری یا نداری یه نامه اینجا خواست از من از کردیت پرو
Right. Yep. So after a few years, I actually was trusted to handle one of the big contract in Indonesia. It's the PSM contract in Mahakam. It's a $14 million operation. And yeah, I stayed there as a operation coordinator and base manager. But I didn't really like manager position. So I tried to pivot to subsurface position again. Then I got accepted to RTS as a senior production technologist. And my specialization in RTS is actually production enhancement, which is how we are able to enhance production of an oil, gas, or geothermal well. The formation depth analysis that Christophic has mentioned, some of them are scaling, some is production. And then I'm also trained in integrated asset modeling, which is like where we simulate the entire production system in either oil, gas. Well, most of our project is in offshore fields. Then I've also quite well versed in complex role modeling such as multilaterals. And lastly, because I begin as a fracturing engineer, so I'm really I'm really knowledgeable in fracturing simulation and design. So that's my background. But yep, before we start off with the actual presentation of our technology, I would like to get a sense of why we do what we do. So right now, geothermal is held as one of the energy transition, but as you can see here, the world has always been in an energy transition, starting from biomass, coal, oil, natural gas. So, but we forecast as an organization that next will be the golden age of geothermal. So I took this from Rystad back in 2022. So apologies, I didn't have any chance to update it. But you can see the progress of how geothermal will be developed over the next few years, starting from this is where we are standing right now. And you see the capacity that will be generated by geothermal itself will triple internationally. And these are the big players globally, and these are the company. So right now you see globally, Ormat has the biggest production, but right now we are going to zoom in to Indonesia, and well, in Indonesia alone, based on the statistics of the market intel, as of now we have about 700 active wells, and along the years, you see we are going to drill and complete more and more wells within the next few decades. And you see the forecasted plant capacity, it's gonna triple. And you see, on the right here, you can see the big players. Right now, it's dominated by Star. Star has the biggest production as of now, but you see in the future probably Pertamina and Yaris is going to overtake Star because they have assets all over Indonesia. So let's get get right back to business. This is a photo that I took when I was working in a geothermal site. So we have a different location, and it's actually part of different campaign. But you see, both actually involves a rig here. So the tower here is called a rig. This is where we do our intervention drilling or stuff how that actually and how we enter the wellbore. And I would also like to give a bit of introduction what's a component of the rig. So the rig can be divided into 5 systems. So we have a power system. It's as the name stands, it's energized the whole rig, both because by engine, and the engine will energize the hydraulic, and hydraulic is going to power all kinds of system within the rig. And the hoisting system has a job to run in hole and pull out the drill string, and the rotary system is tasked to rotate the drill string. So it's between pulling and rotating. It's done by 2 different systems. And next is we have a circulation system. So between the mud pit, shell shaker, and this and mud pump as well. These are tasked to circulate mud in and out of the wellbore. So it's going to be recycled over and over again. And the last thing will be the well control system. So it's just contingency in case blowout happens, but so it's it just happened really often. So it's become a standard for all rigs to have a well control system. And you know the movie Deepwater Horizon. So the last system is actually to prevent that sort of catastrophic event. Right. So if you've been paying attention to Christovik's presentation, you must have known all kinds of challenges in geothermal. Anyone wants to pitch in on what kind of challenge that you will face in geothermal system? All right. Well, I'll just move on. So first we have low permeability. So that is often encountered in geothermal. We have the heat, but we don't have the well doesn't have the capacity to flow. So it's only hot, but nothing flows out of it. And then we also often encounter low medium to medium temperature and pressure. So in the sense that between those two, the well might not be hot enough or doesn't have adequate pressure to flow the water, the fluid out of the well. And low productivity means all of them combined together. Means just the well doesn't have any production that comes out of it, or very low that is just not economic to produce from it. Then acidic fluid production. So if you've heard of a field in Taiwan called Tatun, so it's pretty hot. It has a decent discharge, and the pressure is pretty good as well. But the bad news is the fluid that comes out of the well is pretty acidic, in a way that the well will be corroded very fast, and it won't be able to hold its own integrity, and the surface facility just cannot handle the acidic fluid. And oversaturated brine production means it will create scale and cold fluid incursion just where the well is temperature is getting lower and lower. And at some point it's just doesn't really worth your while to produce from that well. And unstable formation means that you have the unstable formation that actually disrupt your drilling activity. So I will probably explain it in detail later because I'm going to present two of our technology, which is the drilling fluid and the drill bit. But just to know, if you, because you're from geology, I take it, AAPG, if you're familiar with montmorillonite group minerals, then this is it, and it's going to cause all sorts of problem during drilling. And sustained generation, which means just the difficulty in sustaining generation with all of this problem above. And as a organization which that dwells in energy, we try to, of course, we try to penetrate the market, and we try to offer our technology and adapt it from the oil and gas industry to geothermal. So in all of these stages of the exploration and development, you see that these are the challenges that you encounter, and we have all the sorts of global expertise that is able to be consulted and advise you with the technologies that is offered below. So in this session, I think we will mainly focus on the wellbore construction. So especially these two called drill bits and drilling and completion fluids. So let's see later. So let's start off with drilling fluid. So you see here we have a mud pump that pumps the mud into the wellbore. So with the mud hose all the way to the drill pipe, and it's gonna exit through the drill bit and circulates back to the annulus. And you see here in the mud return, it's going to flow into the mud pits, and then it's going to be recycled back after it has been treated, and it's gonna be pumped into the well can. So, but the main function of the drilling fluid is shown on the right. First, we use drilling fluid to control the formation pressure, and actually to lift the cutting from the drilling activity. So once you're drilling, you produce some sort of debris called cutting, and it needs to be lifted. Otherwise, your drill string is going to get stuck on the bottom hole. And well, it's not its main task, but drilling fluid actually cools down and lubricates the drill bit down here. And it's also transmits hydraulic energy to the base and to the whole downhole. And one of the things that where we tinker with the chemical of the drilling fluid is to actually maintain wellbore stability. So in a sense, we always put salts to create brine during completion, because we are trying to stabilize the montmorillonite group minerals, so it won't actually collapse when it's in contact with the drilling fluid, because if it's in contact with fresh water, it will just swell. And this is one of the issue that is often encountered with unstable formation. So you see if we are drilling in the shell section, or in geothermal, we often encounter paleosol. The drilling fluid is actually supposed to stabilize the well and the drilling fluid pressure, but some point the drilling fluid is lost into the formation, and when it's lost, it will allow the overburden stress to actually push down the wall, and it will just cause sloughing, which means the material will come down into the wellbore. And if you're drilling like several several meters of it, just imagine how many materials that will be able to, just to come down into the wellbore, and it's really difficult to lift. So we came up with this improvement in the drilling fluid. So the technology is called Perflex. So it's HPWBM is actually called high performance water-based mud. So it's an improved version of water-based mud. In oil and gas, we can actually use OBM, which is an oil-based mud, to avoid the shale issue. But it's just not applicable in geothermal. And right now, lots of oil and gas companies actually shifting to use this Perflex or improved water-based mud, because we don't have to go through all the environmental regulation issue and processing it, which is actually costs a lot if we use this water-based mud. But and because all based mud just has a lot of operational and logistical constraint and takes all kinds of cost to process them. And these are the components that we mix into this Perflex system. It has deformable polymers, swelling suppressant, and polymer encapsulate, and aerobic enhancer. So all of this together, it will create a shell stability, place stability, and improve rate of penetration, and reduce torque and drag. So means your rig will work more efficient, and you will have actually better cutting return. So in terms of cutting, it will be lifted and preserved. So you will have a better data and kind of see. For geologists, you will have a better knowledge of the formation in this way. And I would like to highlight how the clay inhibition of Maxgard works. So if you remember, the smectite is type of clay that is layered, and in between is we have the clay layers here and the cation in between. So if water enters, it's gonna break up this layer and it's gonna expand. But the way the polyamine within the Maxgard works, it's gonna enter the layer and prevent the water from breaking up the cations. So it's going to electrochemically binds the layers, the clay layers together, and prevent it from absorbing excessive water and collapse into the wellbore. And another thing that we often encounter is excessive loss by fractures. But in this fluid, actually, we are able to find a way to plug the porous and microfractures that is causing this loss. So all of these chemical together, you can see in the picture here how the chemical is able to actually plug the fractures, because usually it's really difficult. So all of this together, it creates one big drilling fluid system that is able to overcome our challenges in geothermal, and it's only recently been introduced to the geothermal market, and it's already creating a difference. So this is a case study from one of the operator in Indonesia. So you can see that by overcoming the stuck pipe alone in the drilling operation, we are able to save $1 million. So imagine if we can apply all of this technology in all of the wells in the geothermal development drilling or an exploration drilling. How many cost saving that we are able to do by just using this technology. So the next will be drill bits. So Baker Hughes actually starts off as a manufacturer of drill bits in the early 1900s. It was originally a company established by Howard Hughes, and we were one of the earliest company to create drill bits. And if you see the quotes here by Howard Hughes, we don't have a monopoly. Anyone who wants to dig a well without a huge bit can always use a pick and shovel. So that's the joke back then. And well, afterwards we were acquired, M&A forcibly acquired by Baker, but right now we've become a Baker Hughes. So anyhow, just a bit of history. But conventionally, drill bit selection in the modern era is pretty straightforward. So you have PDC to cross the hard formation, or tricone to kind of shear the softer formation. So our solution to this problem, because it was just so inefficient, we have to every time we were drilling a soft formation, we will use a tricon. But then if we encounter a hard formation, we will pull it up, then insert the PDC. So let's see, its cycle of pull out and running hole takes 12 hours. You will already wasted about 1 day of rig that probably costs you about in onshore between $30,000 to $50,000 per day. So this is a really huge cost. So our solutions to this problem is we created this hybrid drill bits that is able to take into account that just brings the best of both PDC and Tricon and combine it together into a drill bit called Chimera. So if you can see here, Chimera actually has a part of PDC and part of a Tricon in one bit. So it's able to actually improve your cutting structure. And oh, this is the mechanism. So you see here, sorry, this is not showing up. There's supposed to be an animation. Ah, sorry, here it is. So the tricon is supposed to eat up this to create this, shearing, and this is where the PDC part of the Chimera comes in and just take off the whole rocks. So we'll see later that we have a concrete case study for Indonesia, especially in the German market, where you are often encounter hard rock, but in intermittently you will also encounter soft rock. And so you've seen how it works. So it's firstly introduced in 2012, then it's been developed over and over again to have an optimized structure, and now we are already at Mach 5. So it's lastly introduced in 2020. Well, the idea for it to be optimized, so our customer will actually have a lower cost per foot when drilling, and it reduces the risk of non-productive time. And this is the case study from a geothermal field in Central Java. And as you can see here, on the left axis you have the mid rates, which means this is the section that is drilled by the bit here. So hybrid means it's Chimera, and PDC means it's PDC. You can see here in both cases of Chimera, it's able to drill longer, and it has a way higher ROP. And well, in this case, PDC is only able to drill 54 meter, and it's pulled up due to failure. And during the PDC, it actually has a very low rate of penetration as 7 meter per hour. So that's really, really low. And in another case in Central Java, we actually, you see here the comparison between the wells and the cases. So these are the mid rates again, and the rate of penetration in the red triangle. So in both cases, you see that Chimera outnumbers its competitors, which is PDC and Tricon. And Chimera, well, of course, this here shows that it has a way higher rate of penetration, 24 instead of 8, 9, 14, or 9. Is average of less than 10. And the mid rates also is way longer here, so it's able to complete this section within one run. So yeah, seeing the loss of our technology. So in conclusion, the challenges in geothermal involves low permeability, low to medium temperature and pressure, which led to low productivity. Then we also encounter acidic fluid production. Then there's also the oversaturated brine production, cold fluid incursion, unstable formation, and sustained power generation. And because as an energy technology company, we will always be developing our solutions to be relevant in the changing energy landscape. And lastly, which is relevant to you guys, we always welcome talents to join our organization. Yep, I think that's my presentation. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, that is the end of the first session. Thank you so much to Mr. Christovik Simatupang and Mr. Ken to your excellent and insightful presentation. And now let's continue the next session. We will start the Q&A session for 20 minutes. For the participant who wants to ask, please don't hesitate to ask and raise your hand first. And also you can ask the question with Bahasa or English. So for the participant, if you have any question related to the topic and the material, you can directly ask the question. And for participant who wants to ask question via chat, you should use this format, name underscore question, and I will call your name, and then I will give you permission to unmute your audio and also turn on your video. Okay.
I think there is one that raises his hand. Reggie?
Yes. Can I ask you a question? Can I ask the speaker for the question, MC? Is it loud?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you for Mr. Christovik and Mr. Ken for such a great presentation. Pardon my English if it's not good enough. And secondly, I'm sorry if this question get a little bit out of topic. So I wanna ask a simple question. Is it possible that geothermal energy can be converted into something like oil and gas, or well known as fuel for our vehicle? As we know that common use for geothermal energy is for electricity and power plant. That's all from me, I think. Thank you.
Probably want to answer?
Yeah.
The GFE specialist.
Yeah, Ken, go ahead, Ken. After you answer, then I will also give my answer. Go ahead. You want to answer or you want me to answer? After you
Well,
can.
to clarify a bit, so you are asking whether geothermal can be converted to electrify other industries other than the electricity, or what actually? So I didn't really catch it.
So can I just use Indonesia to
Yeah,
make
yeah,
it
yeah,
clear?
sure.
Oke, jadi pertanyaan saya itu apakah geothermal energy atau energi panas bumi itu bisa dikonversi sehingga bisa menjadikannya sebagai bahan bakar untuk kendaraan kita gitu, Pak? Seperti bagaimana listrik yang mentenagai kendaraan-kendaraan sekarang gitu. Gitu. Mungkin apakah medianya berupa seperti listrik juga atau mungkin ada media lain gitu, Pak? Itu yang bikin saya sedikit penasaran sih.
Yeah, okay, I'll try to join in. You can answer also later. So yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I will try to use both bahasa and English. Pertama bahasa dulu ya. Jadi pertanyaan bagus Mas. Jadi geothermal itu kan bukan sesuatu yang bisa ditransfer dari satu lokasi ke lokasi yang lain. Geothermal itu butuh transmission line, ya kan? Butuh tiang listrik untuk kemudian setelah dia dikonvert jadi listrik bisa ditransfer dari satu lokasi ke lokasi yang lain. Kalau misalkan nggak ada transmission line yang nggak bisa ditransport, itu adalah kelemahan geothermal. Tapinya, pertanyaan Mas bagus. Jadi ketika geothermal itu kita gunakan, itu bisa kita gunakan untuk mengkonvert sesuatu menjadi sesuatu. Jadi Mas mungkin pernah dengar hidrogen. Hidrogen itu adalah H2. Hidrogen itu bisa diambil dari air. Air itu H2O kan. Nah, elektrolisisnya, pemisahan H2 sama oksigen itu pakai proses elektrolisis, electrolyzer. Nah, kalau electrolyzernya sumber listriknya dari geothermal, maka labelnya bisa jadi green hydrogen. Nah, saat ini sumber listrik untuk electrolyzernya ada banyak. Ada oil, ada macam-macam lah. Nah, kalau sumbernya masih dari fosil, dari coal, dari oil, untuk sumber listriknya, maka labelnya bukan green hydrogen, tapi blue atau gray hydrogen. Nah, tapi kalau misalkan sumbernya dari geothermal listriknya, itu maka hidrogennya adalah green hydrogen. Nah, hidrogennya ini bisa kita masukin ke tabung, terus tabungnya ditransport, itulah jadi bahan bakar untuk bus, untuk mobil. Saat ini di Singapura, itu semua busnya tenaganya pakai hidrogen. Nah, okay, I will translate to English. So basically, geothermal can be converted, or can be used as a source of energy to convert something into an energy that can be used as a power to be an input of power for certain vehicles or certain buildings. So basically, geothermal can be used as an energy sources for electrolyzer to convert the H2O to separate the hydrogen from H2O from the water, from any type of water, and the hydrogen itself, after separation in the electrolyzer, will be stored in a gas tube, and the gas tube can be moved from one place to another place and can be used as an energy sources of hydrogen. So it's a common energy right now in Singapore, while most of the mass transport in Singapore use hydrogen, especially the bus transport. I think that will be my answer. Ya, itu Mas jawabannya. Mas Ken, do you would like to add more?
No, you answered it perfectly well.
Oke, terima kasih untuk Bapak Christovik sama Bapak Ken. Mungkin sedikit pertanyaan tambahan Pak dari saya. Saya sedikit penasaran juga nih. Tadi kan Bapak menyebutkan bahwa energi itu bisa dikonvert menjadi hidrogen yang nantinya jadi bahan bakar untuk kendaraan kita gitu. Nah, apakah tenaga yang kendaraan yang berbasis tenaga hidrogen ini lebih efisien dibandingkan dengan kendaraan yang berbasis tenaga listrik yang seperti sedang banyak dikembangkan sekarang ini gitu Pak? Dan apakah itu bisa menjadi alternatif dibanding dengan mobil-mobil atau motor kendaraan elektrik sekarang gitu?
Oke, so ya, bahasa dulu ya. Jadi kalau soal efisiensi, I'm not sure ya Mas ya kalau saya punya expertise atau kapasitas untuk menjawab soal efisiensi dari bahan bakar itu sendiri. Tapi yang pasti melihat tadi yang sudah dipaparkan oleh Mas Ken terkait dengan energy transition. Jadi saat ini hampir semua aspek kehidupan yang ada di dunia sekarang lagi melakukan transisi dari fossil fuel power menuju energi bersih dan ramah lingkungan. Jadi kalau melihat energi trend saat ini, otomatis ini hanya masalah waktu yang kemudian sumber energi ke depannya pasti akan didominasi oleh energi bersih dan ramah lingkungan. Jadi melihat ke arah sana, otomatis nanti mobil listrik ataupun mobil dengan tenaga hidrogen itu akan mendominasi. Tapi saat ini kalau saya lihat memang bukan saya ya, kita lah mungkin ya, kita semua lihat bahwa mobil listrik itu mendominasi saat ini di energi transisi, tapi tidak menutup kemungkinan hidrogen juga akan masuk. Kenapa? Mungkin saya melihatnya dari kacamata adalah kalau hidrogen itu pure, apalagi kalau green ya, green hidrogen ya, bukan blue hidrogen, bukan gray hidrogen. Green itu tidak melibatkan satupun bahan tambang. Nah, kalau misalkan saya nggak tahu nanti kalau misalkan bahan tabungnya materialnya udah bukan bahan tambang lagi ya, tapi kalau di baterai itu kita kan butuh lithium, jadi masih ada mining activities. Nah, mining itu kita tahu ada impact-nya ke lingkungan. Nah, jadi sebenarnya kalau dibilang baterai atau energi mobil listrik itu ramah lingkungan, sebenarnya nggak ramah-ramah amat gitu, karena masih menggunakan mining activities kan. Nah, tapi kalau misalkan kalau hidrogen ya mungkin bisa jadi lebih dikonsider lebih ramah lingkungan dibandingkan mobil listrik itu sendiri. So yeah, to answer the questions, so basically I don't have any expertise to answer the efficiency of hydrogen as compared with electrical vehicle from the battery. So the hydrogen itself is considered more environmental friendly as compared with the lithium battery vehicle, because of the material that used for the hydrogen is mostly coming from the non-mining activities, while the battery itself is considered most of the components still from mining activities. So I think from the environmental standpoint, hydrogen probably is more favorable, but from the mass use right now, I think during the energy transition era right now, battery electrified vehicle is still considered to be the one that can accommodate the energy transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy. That will be my answer. Mas Ken, if you want to add other things.
Yeah, but talking about efficiency, so hydrogen is kind of a still new technology. So just like electric vehicle in the early days with the battery and everything, it's going to its efficiency is going to increase along with time. I mean, you see that even the car that use fossil fuel in the early stage, it's just not efficient between the Ford and the current car. The efficiency is going to improve over time. So this is the logic of it.
Thank you untuk Mr. Ken and Mr. Christovik untuk jawabannya, sangat memberikan insight juga untuk saya, dan saya kembalikan lagi ke MC.
Okay, thank you so much for Mr. Christovik Simatupang and Mr. Ken Prabowo for answering the question. Okay, there's a question from Kang Marvel. Please unmute your audio and turn on your video, and please introduce yourself first.
Okay, first of all, I'm sorry I cannot turn on my camera because it's like really bad low bending here. But I just want to ask quickly about the case study in Mount Rinci prospect. So from the explanation from Mr. Christovik, in way for you to determine, as I can recall, you like make two different drilling sites, right? So I just want to ask quickly about how do you correlate between the geochemistry and geothermometry data when you use the chemical solution like chloride, magnesium, and sulfate. Because as I can recall, all of those like chemical solution hold different like type of hydrological flow that basically determine how the drilling site can exist. So I just want to know how you correlate between the data of the geochemistry and the drilling site, and yeah, how you correlate between the data of the temperature to determine the drilling site. Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, I will allow me to share my screen again. So yeah, I will share my screen again. So yeah, to answer the questions, so basically, can you see my screen now?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, so yeah, to answer the questions, in the case of Mount Rinci prospect here as a case studies, so basically, it's chemistry. So I will just go to this. Okay, I think because the time limitation, so that's why I really speed up everything. So pardon for that one. So basically, as you see over here, the reason why there is a strong point from geochemistry to enable us to interpret the reservoir temperature and also reservoir processes, because each chemical species will have will relate with something. For example, the magnesium. The magnesium in the reservoir is low. So magnesium in the shallow part from the surface water is high. So if we see any reservoir liquid that collected, for example, from the well and exhibit anomalous number in magnesium concentration, then we can suspect there is a downflow fluid from the surface down to the reservoir. And how can it happen? It's because when we lower the pressure in the reservoir, then we are going to invite any fluid to come in. Because when we lower the pressure, for sure, it's just like the basic concept of the fluid dynamic. The fluid will flow from high pressure to low pressure. If we lower the pressure in the reservoir because of the productivity, because of the production activity, then we are going to invite this liquid to come in, to inflate into the reservoir. And how we can detect that one? We detect from the increase of the magnesium concentration in the fluid chemistry that collected from the well. Okay, that's one case. Another case that probably that I need to point out with you is that, for example, the sodium and potassium. Why sodium and potassium? The NAK ratio is very powerful to define the reservoir temperature from the source. It is because sodium and potassium has equilibrium rate slower as compared with the equilibrium rate of the other chemicals. So because of this slow equilibrium rate, then sodium and potassium still capture and still bring any information from its source. For example, the source is coming from the intrusive body. So any fluid that coming and flow away from the intrusive body and bring all these chemicals with the fluid itself, then the sodium and potassium still capture the condition of the source. And that's why when we calculate any geothermometry numbers from sodium potassium ratio, then it will capture the reservoir temperature of its of the fluid sources as compared with other geothermometers. So that's why when we generate any numbers from the sodium potassium, then we are going to understand that numbers that generated from sodium potassium will show the upside potential of the temperature in the reservoir, while the one that generated from other chemicals will exhibit temperature associated with the in situ reservoir as the fluid is collected from. Okay, that would be my answer to your questions. Hopefully, I can answer the questions. Yeah, in bahasa, let me remember what I say. So basically, yeah, magnesium itu ada dua. Jadi magnesium itu tinggi itu ada di shallow part, sementara magnesium itu rendah di reservoir. Jadi kalau ada kenaikan nilai magnesium di reservoir yang kita ambil dari fluidanya, itu menandakan bahwa ada fluid dari shallow datang ke bawah. Kalau dari NaK, sodium potasium, NaK itu punya equilibrium rate yang sangat lambat, Jadi ketika ada geothermometer untuk menggambarkan reservoir temperature, kita hitung dari NAK, dia akan menggambarkan temperatur dari source-nya. Nah, kalau yang lain itu menggambarkan in situ temperature, gitu ya. Seperti itu. Mudah-mudahan menjawab Mas apa tadi, Mas.
Okay. Just a quick follow-up question. Because you said that earlier also, you can basically create the two seams of like a hydrological flow. So basically, what's the like differentiation between like factors that differentiate between the first type and the second?
The fractures from the first
Yeah,
step.
because the different phase. What kind of like consideration that you took to make those two different like phase of hydrological flow, like different phase?
I still don't get it. Your questions. Would you please repeat again?
It's not part of the case study, but it was the earlier example that you give that it's important to make two scenarios of hydrological flow. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So yeah, I will share that one again. Please allow me to share my screen again. Share my screen. Share. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oops. Okay. So I believe you are referring to this slide, right?
Yeah, this model.
Yeah. Okay. The reason why I always mention that it is important for us to develop at least two models in a conceptual model, because we try to appreciate the uncertainty in subsurface data. Okay. We don't see what is really going on beneath our feet. So we don't see what is the reservoir looks like by our naked eyes. So the way we understand the subsurface condition is by collecting data and try to interpret and try to convert the data into information and into something that we try to understand, right? So that's why we still have uncertainty and risk. Always keep in mind, uncertainty and risk. Always keep that one in your mind. So there is no fixed answer to anything down there. So we just try to understand by collecting data, correct? So in order for us to appreciate the uncertainty, so any data that collected and we try to interpret the data, always create two models. The two models is expected to capture all aspects that understood from the data that being collected during the data acquisition activity. So for example, this model A. In model A, what I'm doing here, so basically we try to appreciate that the liquid, the reservoir itself is filled up by the liquid diameter reservoir with temperature 270 degrees Celsius. And in this case, this one is actually Namora Ilangit, the one in Sumatra. So this one producing acid fluid. And in this case, I try to understand how come this system produce acidic fluid. And in order to understand how this acidic fluid is formed, I try to create two models. The model A try to capture that there is a cold fluid coming in from the shallow part, as shown by the blue arrow, and try to penetrate into reservoir and try to sweep everything from the boiling processes that the liquid undergo. So basically the liquid will undergoes a natural boiling. So any steam, any bubbles that contains sulfate concentration will be swept by this cold fluid, and the sulfate itself will go to the liquid phase and create this low pH liquid within the reservoir. So that is model A. In the model B, so I try to suspect that there is possibility the source of the fluid is acidic. So there is an intrusive body that constantly produce acid fluid, and then the fluid discharges all these acidic gases and acidic fluids, and the cold fluid from the shallow part also percolate down and try to sweep and mix with the with this acidic fluid. However, this cold fluid that is probably has higher pH as compared to the fluid that discharging from the bottom of the reservoir, has lower contribution, as lower percentage as compared to the fluid that discharging from the beneath. So that's why the liquid over here is fulfilled by liquid that coming from the source, and its origin is already acidic. So that is the difference between model A and model B. See, in model A, the in situ reservoir has neutral liquid, but the acidic liquid that produced by the well because of this process due to the sweeping of the gas by the cold fluid influx. While in model B, the in situ liquid is acidic and it already dominates all the liquid that being stored in the reservoir. So that is the difference between model A and model B. And there will be implication and consequences of having of each model. By collecting more data, by drilling more wells, we will try to understand which model will be suitable to really represent the reservoir in Namora Ilangit. As of today, I think I haven't heard any updated model from Namora Ilangit so far. These two models still appreciated by the technical team in Sarula operations. So the last time I updated the model in 2018 when I was still working for Sarula. So that will be my answer to your questions. Hopefully it answers.
Okay, cool, thanks.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Hello. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing this useful knowledge. I have three basic questions. First, so I was listening to the presentation while I was doing something else in some parts. Any active projects that Baker Hughes is working on now? If you have, can you please just share the names and where they are? They are in Indonesia or somewhere else in this region. The other one about Malaysian potential of any geothermal projects. If Malaysia has such a place or such a field, geothermal field that is viable for execution. And my last question is whether Baker Hughes invests on some other substitute techniques that don't produce any brine, just in order to make it more environmentally friendly. Some techniques like wellbore heat exchanger or U-shaped heat exchanger or multiple strings. And how viable or how potential are they now, those techniques? If they are at this stage that can be utilized now, so definitely we won't have, I mean, we don't need to deal with a lot of problem with that we have with brine production. I think that's it from my side. I can add another one, but you can answer very short to all of them. Out of curiosity, I've been actually reading about converting oil and gas wells to geothermal wells. So in that case, we can save a lot of money, a lot of money that is needed for drilling, geothermal wells. So I want to say if Baker Hughes has looked at such a potential or not. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for the questions. I really appreciate Sariar. So yeah, there are a lot of questions. Yeah, I think I will divide the answer to my colleagues Ken. So I will answer the first two questions, and I will leave the remaining to Ken, and I will also add if you need more information regarding to the fourth question that you asked. So for the first questions, yes, we are actively involving in many projects in geothermal in many locations, especially in Asia Pacific. As we know that in Asia Pacific, there are a lot of potential of geothermal energy. Like I cannot mention, I'm sorry, because it's very confidential. But we got involved in many projects in Asia Pacific, in Africa, in the US, and also in Europe. So yeah, we are really into energy transition, and Baker Hughes really support the development of geothermal. And for the second question for Malaysia, yes, in geologic setting, Malaysia is not really associated directly with subduction. Most of the high temperature system usually associate with either subduction zone or rifting system, like in the one in Africa. But there are several phenomena that have been observed by many studies that probably associate with intrusion activity, intrusive body. So I thought, based on my observation, the one in Malaysia will associate with intrusive body, the plutonic body, as I saw you in the previous slide that I presented. So basically, in Malaysia, yes, to answer the question, there is a great prospect for geothermal, but that would be very important for us to really define the geothermal setting in Malaysia at the first place, in order to enable us to understand in how we execute the geothermal exploration activity and also geothermal development. Because when we are dealing with something that is not typical of hydrothermal system like the one in Indonesia, then the approach will be different. In the case of Malaysia, I suspect the system is associated with intrusive body or related more to the EGS system. So that's why it's very important to define a certain technology to really enable us to tap the energy from Malaysia. Yeah, I'm sure there is a prospect there, but I cannot really mention the name. I'm very sorry. But if you would like to have us to help you, to assist you on that kind of any project related with that, sure, I'll be very happy to assist you on that. Yeah, for the next questions, I think I will leave it to my colleagues. Ken, please.
Right. Yep. Thank you. So we actually, as a company, we've invested in something called a closed loop system. It's where we put the heat exchangers in the downhole. So in a sense that it's a company joint venture with some other company. It's called Greenfire. So we put the heat exchangers in the downhole. So we just circulate the heat transmission fluid into the wellbore, and it will soak up the heat in the downhole, and we can circulate it to the surface again and extract the heat, and probably using organic Rankine cycle power generator. So that's possible, and it has been proven in one of our US subsidiary. But for converting actual geothermal oil well, we need to take a look at the geothermal gradient. So it needs to have a high enough conductive heat transfer into the wellbore itself. I mean, we already have the optimized thermal insulation, but I think the technology still has a certain limitation. Yeah, probably Bang Toji can explains more. It's still his area actually. But yeah, there is such a technology that exists. But I was working in one of the offshore well in Mali Basin just earlier this year, and it has a actually crazy temperature that reaches all the way to 250 degrees C. And at the temperature, it's actually really feasible to use this technology called green loop. Well, our patent is called green loop, and just circulate probably like super effective heat transmission with like CO2. Yep. So anything to add, Mel?
Sorry, CO2 was used as working fluid?
The heat transmission fluid, because it's able to carry more heat compared to regular water.
CO2 gas?
No, not exactly in gas. It will be in supercritical phase.
And the reason why, in addition to that, Shahriar, so basically, we've been comparing several types of working fluids, like the pentane, and either type of pentanes. We compare a lot, and we come up with this CO2 supercritical fluid as a best fluid to really optimally absorb the heat from the reservoir and transfer to the surface. And we can utilize the heat from the energy from the fluid and convert it into electricity. So I think that is the one that we can conclude from the green loop research that we do. And yeah, we've been seeing and we've been evaluating the application of this technology into not only into geothermal, as you mentioned, but we also try to retrofit the oil and gas wells, because I think that would be the best technology to really bridge and really to accommodate the energy transition from oil and gas to geothermal. Because when we don't use the oil anymore, then all the existing wells need to be still used for something. So that's why we try to consider to apply this technology to oil and gas wells, and we've been testing in some oil fields, and the result I think is going to be published soon. And somehow the thing that we can share right now in this public domain, yes, there is a promising result from the test, and hopefully this result can be shared with a wide distribution to all the industry practitioner and industry developers. Yeah.
Sorry, have you done any pilots?
Yes, we've been performing some pilot tests in the US.
Okay, pilot tests in the US. And have you done anything on nanofluid to improve the heat transferability of the working fluid?
Well,
nanoparticle to improve the.
I'm not sure that.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay, due to the time constraints, we're very sorry. The question from Mr. Shahriar would be the last question. And thank you so much for Mr. Christovik Simatupang and Mr. Ken Prabowo for answering the question. Okay, I hardly to say the time of Q&A session is up. And now we'll be give the symbolize of certificate to Mr. Christovik Simatupang and Mr. Ken Prabowo as a speaker of our geothermal class with the team Geoscience for Geothermal Exploration. And the first certificate will be given to Mr. Christovik Simatupang, and the certificate will be given by Mr. Albert Bayu Aditya as the president of AAPG Unpad SC 2023. To Mr. Albert Bayu Aditya, the time and place is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick. Before I give memento to our speaker, I would like to say thank you to the speaker for the material that you delivered. It was so insightful, and we have some symbols for you, sir. Thank you so much for willing to be a speaker today. Okay, for committee, can take us the picture.
The second certificate will be given to Mr. Ken Prabowo, and also the certificate will be given by Mr. Albert Bayaditya.
Okay, second certificate are given to Mr. Ken Prabowo. I would like to say thank you very much for being willing speaker today in Geothermal class, and I hope that the material that you given are beneficial for us and give us new knowledge for our concept of geothermal class. Thank you, Mr. Ken. And for the committee, you can take us the picture.
Okay. Thank you so much to Mr. Christovik Simatupang and Mr. Ken Prabowo and Mr. Albert Bayaditya. Before we end this activity, we will have the photo session first. So to all the participants, please turn on the video and use the background zoom. Okay, to all participants, please turn the video and use the background zoom. Okay, I think it's ready. Photo will be taken in 1, 2, 3. Okay, for slide 2. 1, 2, 3. Okay. One time, I would like to say thank you to Mr. Christovik Simatupang and Mr. Ken Prabowo for giving us so many insightful knowledge, and also thank you to the participants who have joined the Geothermal class of AAPG Unpad chapter. Now,
Alex, sorry, before we leave, will the recording of this be shared on your social platforms?
yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Now we are on the very end of today's event. On behalf of the organizing committee, we would like to apologize for any mistake throughout today's event. I really hope this class will expand your knowledge about geoscience for geothermal exploration. See you on the next event of AAPG Unpad student chapter. Thank you so much, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much.
Assalamualaikum.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Simatupang, Mr. Ken.
Thank you.